And we are live. So, welcome to episode 270 of An American Werewolf in New Jersey. I am the American Werewolf. In the house tonight, we've got The Power of Christ Compels Bill.
What's happening, guys?
All right, man. I've been here since episode 2. And here we are at 270. So pretty cool, pretty neat.
Yeah, but I just for like 10 episodes at a clip and then show up again.
Well, I'm the only one who has 100% appearance rate. So I have 100% attendance. So somebody's representing. It's all good. And we've got Dr. Michael James from the Divine Will YouTube channel. Thank you both for joining us.
Glad to be back.
Or thank you both for joining me. I misspoke. I apologize.
Thank you for having
me. Yeah. I'm not having a psychotic break, or they, them, doing any of that kind of stuff. I have often said on this channel that things that people do in everyday life are often more horrible than anything you see in any horror movie, in any supernatural, paranormal, the Wolfman, the vampires, and then Mike was there, and unfortunately Bill was not when we covered Zodiac. And clearly you can see that the things that people actually do to each other are far worse than anything you see in a Dracula movie. But every once in a while you run into something that is truly horrific at the paranormal level. And I wanted to get into that today. And I'm talking about Scott Derrickson's The Exorcism of Emily Rose. So if you guys are ready to go, shall we get it going?
Hit it.
Boogie woogie. So we have a little history versus Hollywood happening here because The Exorcism of Emily Rose, as everybody in this panel knows, is based on the true story of a demonic possession and exorcism that resulted in the death of the young girl who was suffering, and her name was Annalise Michelle. There are tons of short clip and short story videos on YouTube that you can find. I think some of the things that most popularize it are the fact that the audio clips from The Exorcism are available online. And if you ever have the opportunity to listen to them, they're quite disturbing and will, pretty much make the hair on the back of your neck stand up. Here we have this film, and this movie has turned 20 this year. It's been 20 years of Emily Rose. What happened in the true story after her death was that the priests involved were placed on trial for negligent homicide. They were convicted of negligent homicide, and then sentenced to time served. So they never actually spent any additional time in prison. The parents of the girl were also they were considering charging them, but decided that they had suffered enough. And this may be the most popularized case of exorcism and possession that we know about. We approached this, and I said that we would do this between the three of us, as people of faith. And so I guess I have a two-part question for each of you. We can start with we'll start with Bill. One, what did you think of the film? Two, do you have an opinion, or maybe you're like, I don't know, as to why these things happen?
Yes, I have opinions. I did enjoy the film. I watched it way back when for the first time, and at that time, I didn't know that it was about Annalisa. And I had known about that case much earlier because of John Lydon and Public Image Limited. He had written a song about the case on his first album that came out in 1980. So I had known something about this case for a long time before I saw the movie. And when I watched the movie, I sat down to watch it. I had no idea what it was. It was just something that popped up on cable. And I enjoyed it. And it took me a while before, the light bulb went over in my head, and I went, wait, this is about that, and then that sent me to do a little internet crawling and sort of revisit the case. So yeah, I did enjoy the movie. Very well done. It leaves it a little ambiguous, I thought. So you can make up your own mind. And why do things like possession happen? I just heard a priest say just today that a lot of it happens because people don't even have the most basic discipline in their spiritual life. So there's a lack of consistency in prayer, in belief, probably lack of consistency in going to mass. It leaves you open to influences. It could be that influence can be your friend or your girlfriend or on TV. But if we're going to believe in these discorporate entities with intelligence and agency, you can be influenced by them too. And yeah, if you're lacking that kind of discipline, I agree with the father that will invite it in. And of course, also the opposite, which is they're also going to attack the people who are most disciplined because they're a threat,
All right. Fair enough. Michael James, what did you think of the film? Do you have an opinion on why this kind of stuff happens? Or maybe even, because I'm going to answer, I'll give an opinion on my own as to why these things happened, or maybe why this happened in this case.
I have so many things to say, so please cut me off and move on to someone else if I go on for too long. But first off, I love the movie. You would be
John.
I love the movie. I find it to be shockingly Catholic and shockingly theologically sound. And as you guys know, I'm very good friends with an exorcist who worked with Gabriel Amorth. So he has real exorcist credentials. And, there's a lot of priests who might inflate their exorcist credentials to appease a certain group out there. But this man has definite exorcist credentials. And he says this movie is 95% theologically accurate. So that's a heck of a statement coming from a Hollywood movie. Now, I think when you look at this situation, and why I find it shockingly Catholic, because if you look at the case of Annalise, I think it's a very important case where the state has a responsibility to say, we can't have church leaders come in here with minors and get them off their medication and kill them. This is a very important issue. In the 70s in Germany, it said a lot about what the church is going to do, the kind of role the church has in the state's responsibility, accountability. And if you look at the facts, or if you look at the surface of the case, you see, well, this is a real victory for protecting people from ministry abuse, from clerical abuse. from pastor abuse, who's going to go in there to devout families, vulnerable people, play some kind of exorcist game and kill children. You could really interpret the whole situation as that. However, this movie doesn't do that. It actually takes a very, very serious, accurate look at what exorcism is, and really even brings about this idea of the victim soul, which is not a very wide publicized part of theology. But I would like to get into exorcisms more, but let me pass it to you, Mike, and then we'll get to that.
Okay. Well, did you have a follow-up as to maybe why you think why it happens, or why did this happen? Or did you want to get back to that later?
Yeah, let me get back to that later because I'd like to unpack that.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I enjoyed this movie very much. It certainly has a different impact now as a member of the church. I sort of scrutinize things a bit more. So I don't know enough to say whether or not it's theologically sound. I didn't find anything that was abhorrent, or I'm just like, oh my God, like, what the hell is that? That sort of thing. I thought that there were fantastic performances by everybody, from Tom Wilkinson as Father Moore, Laura Linney as the attorney. I thought Campbell Scott did a fantastic job as the prosecutor, the Methodist prosecutor, who just thought that this was nonsense, and that, he had an obligation to defend this girl because he's looking at it factually. He sees these photos of this girl who just looks like someone's beating her with hockey sticks. And he's like, no, this guy has to go. Like, we can't do this. That kind of thing. Fantastic performance by Jennifer Carpenter as Emily Rose. I thought she gave a great physical performance with the contortions and the vocal, the vocal performance itself was a whole separate thing. Very well directed. Why this sort of thing happens? I mean, there are obvious reasons, that, we're all aware of, from people who dabble in the occult, or dabbling in mortal sin, these sorts of things, or, neck deep in mortal sin, unrepentant, that kind of thing. This particular case, though, I saw a couple of Annalise Michel videos that I considered to be relatively trustworthy. And it seemed as that this family was an extraordinarily devout family in Germany, perhaps obsessively so. I think my understanding was that this was one of those families who believed that by creating discomfort, or by enduring discomfort, they were alleviating the suffering of others. These children were made to sleep on like hardwood floors at night sometimes, adjusting temperatures so things got cold, not to the point that they were dangerous, but I don't know. It seemed a bit far for me. I don't know if that opened the door for something else, related to pride or something like that. But this wasn't a typical case where somebody was playing with tarot cards or a Ouija board, or something like that. But for some reason, this thing befell this girl, and it cost her life. Her body just eventually shut down from malnutrition and from all the abuse that it took, from a lot of it self-inflicted.
Could I jump in? Not to before we get to Bill. All right. So very interesting stuff when we think about demonic possession. So what I've been taught is that there's 4 different levels of the demonic influence on people. There's the fixation, the obsession, the oppression, the possession. Possession is extremely, extremely rare. But fixation at this early demonic attack is something that maybe we've all experienced. Fixations with alcohol, fixation with porn, fixation with lust, fixation with overeating. And then you can see how that can easily grow to now it's a demonic obsession. Now you're obsessed with this thing. Now it's causing havoc in your life. And if that spiritual illness keeps on going, then it moves to this oppression, where the demonic is just going to humiliate you, make you beg for this, take away your humanity or depress your humanity and make a fool out of you over this fixation that he now has more and more power over you. and then it ends up in this possession. Now, how do these things happen? You mentioned a few things, dabbling with these things. So take a moment and think about it. We believe that we pray, and somehow the thoughts in our head are somehow have spiritual power, right? Very odd when you think about it. Likewise, the gifts God gave to Lucifer and the dark angels are still in effect. So people can actually do spiritual prayers, get in touch with dark power, and cast curses. So there's some curses that might be people not even knowing it, that can be picked up from certain people. Let's say the person who's just making money as a tarot card girl in the corner. Well, maybe 20% of her really believes she has these sort of powers, and she's really in contact with demons, and she's really casting these curses. Hundreds of years ago, too, also, ancestry curses. You know, the world was a much more superstitious place, and people, if you talk to some, especially ethnic traditions, hundreds of years ago, if somebody owed you money, if someone wronged you, you had to go and urinate on the grave, and you had to curse all their ancestors and offspring. So there could be things in the bloodlines from generations ago that cursed all the offspring of your great-great-grandmother, and why you experience these fixations. We don't know, but these are all the types of reasons that might cause that and might grow into this. But there's an extremely rare case, okay? Oh, and it all gets worse by cooperating with the demonic forces. But the most extreme rare case is this victim soul of what Emily Rose was, of what Annalise was. And it's this idea, you know, in our best spiritual moments, we stop asking God for us. We stop even thinking about our lives, and we start to feel for the whole broken world. And our prayers become more like, God, I want to help you heal all the suffering in this broken world. And then for certain people who desire it, he says, my crucifixion is an eternal moment outside of time. Come and co-redeem with me. Come and experience all of my pain and suffering and be a victim soul with me. And you can have this opportunity to echo the glory of the crucifixion, of salvation, by being a co-redeemer that will go on forever and ever in heaven. And these are very rare, special saints who get this opportunity. That's why it seems masochistic to most people, but that's why, you know, stigmata happens and these great saints happen. So that's a lot. Boom, there it is.
Yeah, that's real mysticism. You know, and it's certainly not, you know, what you hear in the standard, you know, homily. But then again, you know, this isn't a typical case. And what I liked about the film was that it sort of steps outside the standard horror trope because it's a courtroom procedural. Everything that you are seeing is happening in terms of the horror, in terms of the paranormal, in terms of the demonic. It's happening in retrospect. It's happening in flashback. It's happening in courtroom testimony. So there's this very rational, cold slab where everything is sort of being presented for us, the viewer, to interpret. You know, and you know, what do you really think? You know, how did you guys see it that way, Bill? I mean, did you? Because like the standard exorcism is, you know, the priest shows up and, you know, there's spectacular this and that, but this was more than that.
I appreciated that, in that most exorcism movies that I see are really just garbage. Like, people are just throwing, you know, these tropes at the wall, hoping that they stick. This one was, how to describe it, like, it was a serious weighing of evidence, or at least taking the audience through a logical process of, can you believe this? Can you believe that? You know, you have to make up your mind as far as, did the church do enough? Did the state do enough? That were the parents at fault? It brought you through all of those places, even though it was a little sensationalized with all the flashbacks of, you know, contortions and seeing demon faces and all that, which was fun, and you know, the horror movie. But at the heart of it, it was very much sort of, there's this case that's controversial, and there are two sides of it, and they're trying to sort of help you make your mind up with it. It wasn't. I don't feel the movie made you make a choice. It didn't. It wasn't a leading question. It was more like good historical fiction, leading you to find out more about the real events. That's all I can say about it. I'm not very intellectually astute on this right now. It was more visceral for me and emotional.
Yeah, it was kind of like a post-mortem of this thing that happened. And listening to it's hard, like it's difficult for me actually to discuss it without actually getting into the real case. And these stories, that she literally did see demon faces everywhere. She claimed she saw demon faces everywhere, that her the knees broke from all the squatting and slamming on the floor that we constantly saw.
But what I don't like is that they blame the priests for that. She did that before the priests started their exorcisms. She was doing that on her own because she was trying to rid herself of these demons in the real case before it even went that far. She was doing everything she could devotionally to get rid of them in her, sort of almost fundamentalist, very devout way, where she's like, I'm being attacked by demons. I got to do something.
What did you guys think of Laura Linney, who I thought she did a great job as this sort of agnostic? I'm trying to bring a photo up here. Who's sort of, she goes through her own sort of moral journey as well, because she's very ambitious. At the start of the film, she wants to climb. She wants to be a full partner in her law firm. Maybe she's a little morally compromised too, because she's just had some guy acquitted who then later goes out and, murders somebody else. And, as she starts to sort of take on or feel the weight of like what all of this entails, I thought she did a really good job. I always liked Laura Linney. I remember her from Mystic River, where in the end, she barely says anything. And then in the last 10 minutes of the movie, she suddenly becomes Lady Macbeth, and just, sort of justifies everything her husband has done at the end of the film. But in this, she was, it wasn't just the story of the girl. It was also this person and a lot of other people along the way.
Well, the fact that she makes that declaration of I'm an agnostic sort of lends to what I felt about the movie, taking a sort of like a neutral approach and letting the viewer make their own decision. You're starting from a point where it's all neutral, and let the evidence play, represent itself, kind of thing.
It wasn't just that. I'm addressing this to both of you. It wasn't just that. She actually starts to come under spiritual attack. And that is kind of what, gets her to start making the turn into seeing that this is more than just, the standard weird case that I'm used to sort of taking on, this high profile thing. You get all these weird things that are happening to her at night. 3 o'clock in the morning, and she's waking up, and there's all these sounds going on in her house, so on and so forth. She's being nudged a little bit towards, or at least away from the agnosticism, maybe into a little bit of legitimate belief. There's, what's that saying? No one drives you closer to God than having the devil on your heels, so to speak.
I really liked her acting, and I think you're right. They did show her character move in that direction, so there was movement for the character. I very much agree with Bill that this courtroom drama and horror coming together, merging of these genres was really cool, but it's fundamentally the courtroom drama, which is asking you to decide what do you litigate what you think about this situation. I thought all the acting was very consistent, like it was all subdued and realistic, which was a contrast to Emily Rose and all this, super paranormal stuff going on, you kind of really needed that. You needed all these real characters. And even when the devil was attacking her, it wasn't too much. It wasn't over the top. It was subtle. It was good. You really needed to be grounded in reality to better appreciate all the stuff that Emily Rose was going through.
I think no one exemplified that more than Campbell Scott, who just... I think the thing that's different about this movie in terms of the standard, like we covered, nefarious, so on and so forth. And in the end, how that sort of ends, where he goes to the chair. But in the standard possession fair or possession film, the victim is liberated. Here, it sort of ends, it starts off in defeat, and so it's just a matter of telling the story. And so you can actually see his perspective, and that, like I said before, it looks like somebody's like worked this girl over. And he's, someone has to be responsible for that. Like here in the physical world, this girl is dead. She's surrounded by adults, and yet somehow this was allowed to happen. I can understand his perspective on that. It's not an irrational perspective. He's not trying to go after anybody. And the way that the story unfolds in the film and in real life, is there accountability? Not exactly, or at least not to his satisfaction.
It's a legitimate concern when you look into this case in real life. There were red flags up and down the ladder. I'm still not 100% convinced, and I am kind of lean towards his point of view with this case, that there should have been more accountability. There should have been more done, but you have to give it to them because it was the 70s, which weren't as advanced as we are now. When we look at it from 21st century viewpoint, you have to always bring your mind back to, well, what was the context of the 1970s? And a lot of people don't do that.
Very good.
Yeah, it's a problem with people who talk about history. They always constantly are viewing it through the prism of 21st century American mores and ideals. And even this movie, it's modernized. It's not the 70s, so they don't make that point.
Excellent point. And let me jump in to say that, yet more than just legitimate, it's extremely, extremely valuable even today. We cannot have any religious leader going into mentally ill children, convincing their parents, using their authority, and playing exorcism games and killing people. I mean, we just can't have that. The state needs to be responsible for that. And there has to be something that society says no. And you think about back in the 70s, the type of influence that religious leaders had. It's not like today, right? Totally not like today. And the type of acceptance people had and the type of mistrust that they had. And there's still a problem today in low-income communities. They don't want medical treatment. And there's a lot of compound reasons for that. So it's very interesting to think about that.
It's a huge problem. I was watching a documentary about the FBI and these child kidnappings in the 70s, and people literally didn't think about this stuff in the way that we do now. The FBI guy was like, yeah, we had no protocols about child abduction and children, none. And that was 1974. So people did tend to appeal to authority, which is the church, police, FBI, and whatever, your bishop. But all these people were completely unprepared at the time to deal with certain things, and we trusted them to do that, even though they had no tools to do it because it was new.
Absolutely. But this is why I'm convinced that Annalise was a saint. And but that being said, right, and I feel strongly about what I just said, I'm convinced that in this particular case, she is a rare saint because the details of the case is so consistent with real mystics, real saints, and real demonic possession, according to one expert that I know and from the little bit that I know. So that's why I'm convinced.
It's
But other
an
than that, it's a tough
Go
thing.
ahead. No, it's an interesting point you guys are bringing up, in that the perspective of the lay people back then, in terms of being much more trustworthy, led to problems, perhaps.
Yeah.
We talked about this in terms of when we talked about chocolat, Mike. If you remember, we talked about this was 1960. This was France. People were still shunning other people. People could just be sort of cast out, if the community decided that they didn't like what you were doing. And in that particular film, it's the mayor that's, sort of leading the charge to, make this one person an outcast, and everybody just kind of goes along with it. In the book, it's actually the priest. And you were mentioning that, that there were, some positive reforms in terms of Vatican II that sort of put that sort of thing to rest, that we don't do that sort of thing anymore. We don't just throw people away. And perhaps also, now, just to restate very quickly, people are more questioning, and they're less likely to just, sort of go along. I'm sure that the procedures from the 1970s to today, because of cases like this or this particular case, have greatly changed.
A lot of that started with Adam Walsh, and realizations after that case got applied everywhere, to every corner, and then the priest sex abuse scandal. Everyone started questioning and blaming everywhere. So we're extremely careful now with all these things, where in the 70s it was a little lackadaisical.
Absolutely. And when you think about even today, you think about your low income, undereducated, devout family that's suffering trauma, right? Their child is suffering. They're not in they're very vulnerable place right there.
Mm-hmm.
And to have someone come in with that vulnerable people and start saying, don't take your medicine. I can save you. I'm going to play these games. I'm going to lay my hands.
Yeah.
I'm going to be famous in the neighborhood. There's got to be accountability for a whack job religious leader to do that and hurt people.
Yeah. It's a tragic case here in the physical world. Is there anybody, is there any question? Does anybody here believe that she may not have been possessed? If you were to say that, I wouldn't criticize it.
I have, like I said, I have doubts. I've read the transcript though, and it blows my mind. And any normal person, I would say, that's got to be coming from somewhere else. Any normal 23-year-old wouldn't have thought that deeply on all these subjects. But she comes from an extremely devout family, and people with mental illnesses can sort of channel things that they've heard since they were young and sort of turn it into a narrative. The thing they alluded to at the end of the movie is that of her being the saint and her suffering was redemptive. But I had read that they exhumed her body and it was not incorrupt, and that sort of put a pall over the idea that she was this saint. I can't come down on one side or the other. I just find that there are a lot of inconsistencies from what I know, but I'm no expert. Things like, why is it Hitler and Cain and Nero? Why are you being possessed? And of course, demons can lie and make up all these names and pretend to be these people. But why are she possessed by 6 celebrities? That kind of thing. So as much as I want to believe, I have some doubts in the end, but I can't make a decision on yes or no. Like I said, it's still open as far as I'm concerned. I just haven't seen the definitive proof. I'll be agnostic about
no, those
I'm going to law
worthy
school.
All I could add is this. Is the messiness of a victory for Christ playing out in time, right? So if we just, and what I mean by that is if we entertain this idea that she really was a saint and she went through all this suffering, that still possibly there's still a lot of rage against her from the demonic world. And look at all the negative things that occurred too. Like there's less exorcisms being done, which the demonic like that because of this case. They could completely still have a grudge against her and keep these doubts going on. It's messy. It's messy, and it doesn't. And I think that kind of points to the authenticity of anything, because it doesn't really. All these things don't tie up in nice little bows. Someone who does something great for Christ is usually dragged through the mud for generations and isn't revered.
That's true, and the fact that we still talk about it 40 years later, 50 years later, the fact that it's still out there in the zeitgeist, it brings people to consider these questions, the broader questions, and that's a positive thing. Father Amorth could do 100 exorcisms and they're routine or whatever, and no one will ever hear about them. But this movie and Annalisa and all the popular culture speculation about it is what gets people to start thinking about this.
It's almost like there's still a spiritual battle being fought over this girl 40 years later.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I mean, and also again, not to repeat myself, but I mean, she died, whereas that is not the standard ending for these things. I mean, maybe they go on, at least my understanding is they may go on for a short period of time or a long period of time, but it doesn't lead to death. So I don't know.
So there's
in my heart.
Well, you got to consider was the exorcism the reason she died, really? Because she was way sick before the exorcisms even started. She had grand mal seizures. They said she might have been schizophrenic. She had a bout with pneumonia, which took a toll on her way before any priest started saying, hey, maybe we should have an exorcism. So she was already sickly before this thing took place, and it may not have been the fault of the priest doing the exorcism. It just happened while they were doing it.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I don't think that the priest should have, I'm not saying throw the priests in prison or something like that, but I had to acknowledge in the physical world, this girl is dead. Who's responsible for that? That was simply the statement I was making. In my heart, I do feel that this is an authentic case, which I think that is the lens through which I would view it. Because I know once my brain starts turning on, I'll just start, your brain starts spinning things. Whereas sometimes, just to answer the question with my heart makes for a much simpler process, and one that I'm usually very comfortable with. I'm learning that.
And I just wanted to add that, exorcisms aren't usually done to saints. That's very extremely, extremely rare. Usually exorcisms are done with people who have problems and people who have cooperated with demons, and they go on and on and on, and nobody dies. This is a very extreme case of one of those times where God is allowing the devil to attack one of his saints. He doesn't even allow that with all of his saints, but some of his saints, he allows this to happen. There's precedence for that.
Yeah, that's true. What would she have done to invite this in?
Nothing.
Maybe nothing?
Nothing at all.
Yeah.
According to the story, it was absolutely nothing.
Right.
I mean,
and there's other saints with a precedence to this. Padre Pio, Luisa Picaretta, there's other victim souls very similar to this. Absolutely nothing. This is extremely rare. So the exorcism was never going to work anyway, because God was allowing it.
Okay.
What did we let's get into some of the film, because I think we could sit here and discuss the theology, which I'm happy to do, but I do want to touch on the film. I mean, what did you guys think? Was it scary? I mean, you're like, oh, it's not. It's probably one of the better exorcism films I've seen.
Yeah.
Top 3, top 5, somewhere in there. Because everybody, I don't think I had ever seen Jennifer Carpenter before. This was before Quarantine, which was a remake of that Spanish film, Wreck. And she's just got a great presence. I mean, this exorcism scene, when we finally get to it about 2/3 of the way through the movie, it's pretty damn frightening. You're like, oh yeah, because like if I watch this movie now and I watched it before we, in the preparation for the show a few days ago, it's one of those turn the lights out, kind of things. You're like, okay, I'm gonna watch a freaking really scary movie, which this is.
It's very effective. The cinematography is great. I like that you have bursts of horror in between this sort of procedural court case thing, which I appreciated. It's not immune from tropes. I mean, it's still trying to get attention from the horror movie crowd. So you get the hooded figure skulking against a priest at 3 a.m. and the demon faces in the clouds and all that. And that's all well and good. And it was very effectively done, very well lighted. And yeah, you're right. Her performance is fantastic and scary, where it could be silly, but it's just fantastic.
Yeah, I agree. I really liked the movie. I liked the court. If you look at the courtroom drama stuff, that really got me interested and how they did it. I'm not a horror film fan, but then what else you gonna do? Right? It's an exorcism. But I felt like a lot of the horror stuff was almost like, okay, they have to do this now, and it was almost like a break from a story to do that. But I understand, and they did a good job at bringing these two things together, the horror and the courtroom stuff.
Yeah, and like you said, it's very theologically sound. When I watch Exorcist movies, I'm just sort of sitting there waiting for the ridiculousness, and it never came. And watching it, going, holy shit, I'm scared, because it really was effective, because nothing pulled me out of the movie so that I could laugh and go, pull out the Bible and go, that's wrong and that's wrong, and that was the scary part. Really good, well-researched, well-written Exorcist movies are rare, and this is one of them.
I looked up the director, and it said that he had some philosophy and theology training. He does all these kinds of spiritual horror stuff.
Yes.
And I thought his casting and his telling all the actors just to keep that simple, be realistic, subdue, no one ham it up, no one chew up the set. That was just so important to make everything based in reality. I thought that was just genius.
Yeah.
Hold on 1 second. I want to see what this guy has actually, what Scott Derrickson has done. I will say this real quick, and I've talked to each of you at some point, and maybe related an anecdote where I've had a bizarre experience. I remember I talked to Bill about one that, one's going after my neck one time, and talking to Mike about, particular things when I was on his channel before. I identified with that. I'm like, oh yeah, okay. Like you've stirred something up here, you've got someone's attention or something's attention. It's, probably maybe going to pay you a visit, or, so to speak, that kind of thing. I don't know if you know this, Bill. Mike, remember we did Nefarious?
Yeah.
Did I ever tell you that? Remember, Mike, you texted him, you're like, the video's gone?
Yeah.
Yeah. You're like, I'm like, I was sitting in the parking lot and I was waiting for my dad. I had done my food shopping. I take my dad out on the weekends. And I'm like, he finishes what he's doing because he moves slower. And I'm like, I'll just wait for you in the car. And if you need anything, just give me a call. And I get this text message. And I'm like, it was Mike. And he's like, the video's gone. I just want to let you know. I'm like, oh, did somebody copyright clip? You're like, no, it's gone. Like, it's just like the video is completely. And I'm like, what do you mean? I look on my phone, and sure enough, there's the title with the thumbnail. But when you click the video, there's nothing there.
I'll be down.
Only time that's ever happened to me. And I was like, well, that's weird. And Mike was like, well, just be aware, these sorts of things happen sometimes, this, that. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you could be, there could be spiritual attack here. I was like, oh, I hadn't thought about that. And I was like, ooh, okay, that's a little bizarre. My dad gets in the car. Couple of minutes later, I almost had a major car accident. Like this car pulled out across 4 lanes of traffic and just cut like right into me. And I'm like, what the fuck? I slam on the brakes, and like I never have any sort of traffic incidents. When the light rings, someone may honk the horn instantly. I'm like, hey, buddy, you should have woke up 15 minutes earlier. That kind of thing. But yeah, that particular day, just some bizarre shit. And so that's not an isolated incident for me. I have more than a few stories just across my life about that kind of thing. And yeah, I identified with that. It's not fun. It's not what it's not a horror movie or anything like that, but it's not like Emily Rose. But yeah, I identified with what was happening to the lawyer, the priest, at 3 o'clock in the morning, in the jail, where he's in the jail, and you're like, what the hell is that coming around the corner? That kind of stuff.
My favorite story about stuff like that is, oh God, now I'm drawing a blank. All right. One saint, female saint, from the late medieval times. She would be visited by demons. She'd wake up in the middle of the night and see them in her room, and she'd say something like, "Oh, it's you," and turn over and go back to sleep. That's how you gotta approach that.
Yeah, I remember I told you about
the demons would shove her on the floor. So
that's Teresa Villa, by the way.
Yes. Then they get shoved on the floor. So yeah, it's tough dealing with demonic apparitions.
I remember telling Bill about a particular story, that I've talked to you about, with the neck thing, and I woke up, I was like, what the hell was that? And I think I said the St. Michael prayer, and maybe like 3 Hail Marys. Just turned over and went right back to sleep. But like as I've said before, I never remember my dreams. I remember like that is just, I still remember that to this day, along with all the other 5 or 6 instances that I've had that have just been super bizarre.
Make an impression, man.
Yeah, it will. Yeah, it will.
Before we move on, I think everyone fights with demons, and everyone hears demonic voices. And I think whether they can articulate it or they're fully aware of it, I think it's a common internalized experience that resonates with a lot of people.
It wouldn't surprise me. I don't see how it's not possible, especially, and I'm not saying I'm on the right track, but that, if you're trying to be influenced, that there is an influence in one direction, to, this, that, or the other, to, make you feel a particular way, make you feel bad, make you doubt, make you afraid, these sorts of things, that's the common human experience, so, where does that come from? Yeah, it wouldn't surprise me in the least. Whether you recognize it as such is another thing entirely.
Famous internet exorcist Monsignor Rossetti always talks about how there are thoughts and feelings and urges that we get that are not of us. They're coming from somewhere else, and most people can't recognize it as that. And it keeps them from being able to battle it because they think it's all their experience within them, and it's not, or at least
some people have a bad thought and it ruins their whole day. Maybe that's the point. To just ruin your whole damn day, and then, you carry that over into the next day. You got that spiritual hangover. I think it was Jung who said at its core, all psychological problems are spiritual problems.
Wow.
I think he was right. Is there what else did you guys want to get into about the film or about anything in general? I mean, it sounded like what do we got?
I mean, what can you say about the film? It's effective. It's study of sides. It'll make you think about some eternal questions. It's a really good film, and it's scary as heck. It's filmed very, very well. What else can you say, really?
They are actually making The newest possession film coming out, Exorcism film, is going to star Al Pacino. And yeah,
Okay.
Al Pacino is going to be one of two priests, and supposedly it's the case from Georgetown or wherever it was that the Blatty story originated from.
They're going to get closer to that, or are they going to screw that up?
I don't know. I do not know. I know Mike sort of winced when he heard Al Pacino.
I have low expectations of any movie that comes out about any kind of demonic possession, but Al Pacino, holy moly!
in the Devil's Advocate, though, right? When he played,
That was good. Yeah,
that was a good movie.
Yeah,
You know,
old 80-year-old Al Pacino. I don't know. I would have very low expectations.
It's easy to make fun of Al Pacino now that he's old and 80, but you forget that he's like, not long ago he was making Heat. You know, and he's like one of the best to ever do it. He really is. He's one of the best to ever do it.
Yes.
Fantastic.
Well, you know what? Look at the priest that was in this one. You know, I mean,
Tom Wilkinson.
Yeah, it didn't make it about him. You know, he just played his role in it. He was just the priest. You know, he wasn't over the top. He just gave his lines, and I think it all worked. I think if any one of these actors is Al Pacino, I'm acting, I think the whole movie goes down the drain like a movie like this, a possession movie.
I think he's out of the yelling phase, but that's an interesting point because I always got the impression from Wilkinson in his performance here that he was consistently like out of his depth.
Good. Yes. Good observation. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. He's just trying to do something. I'm going to try this exorcism. You know, it's not established that he's an exorcist. Apparently he got permission, you know, and he always just seemed like two steps behind, you know, throughout the entire, you know, his heart was in the right place. I think he was obviously he was coming from a good place, you know. Then in his defense in the trial, he just wanted to tell the girl's story. You know, it wasn't about him, you know, saying I'm innocent, or, you know, I didn't do anything wrong or anything like that. His point just becomes about, you know, telling, you know, what actually happened. Wilkinson was good. Wilkinson was always good. He's
Mike,
a great actor.
You have a chat here, and
What?
Hey, Internet Eric has a comment.
Oh, Eric.
Something we all were thinking of, but we were too polite to say it.
Not long ago. Heat was back in 1995. And Eric has now kicked off the show. Hey, you know something? That's not as far back as you think, man. Just because you're 4 years old, doesn't mean the rest of us, you know, aren't legal to drink alcohol. Can't take Pacino seriously anymore. Haven't for a long time. You have to understand that this is Eric from Hey Internet Eric here, who doesn't want to watch the new Nick Cage movie either. So, yeah, we're not taking you seriously. That's what's is there anything about this film that you would like to address that we have not discussed, or the case, so on and so forth?
I thought the parents did a good job. I thought they really captured it. They were concerned, overwhelmed. They could have painted them as crazy or as fanatical, but they were just regular, concerned parents and trusting. They just hit the right note, and you could have easily hit the wrong note there.
I think that this was a film where this could have very easily been a film where everybody just loses. And I think because of the scene you have at the end from Emily's letter, we begin to see some purpose in what had happened, as Mike was starting to explain at the start of the stream. You know, and there's a line there: many will come to see the realm of the spirit is real. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm suffering for this so people will see that these things are real. If the devil is real, then God must be real. And, you know, can the answer be as simple as that in the mess of all this horror?
Read the transcript. That'll do it to you. If you read the transcript that they made from the tapes of the exorcism and really think about it and understand it and know the points that they're saying, yeah, you'll get there. It'll nudge you in that direction.
Has anybody ever read the Columbine transcripts? give it a. That's
Could,
something else too. I mean, like if you
Or
were
Gus Van Sant's Elephant, if you want to go there.
well, I mean, if you read the transcripts, they clearly talk about the fact that they're not always like they're just talking to each other, and that they're not always in control of like when somebody else comes forward, that kind of thing. It really is quite disturbing. You can find it just about anywhere, the Columbine transcripts, and you're like, what the hell could they possibly mean by that? Disturbing shit, very disturbing. And here's Eric still rationalizing. I'm just not a fan of Nick Cage lately. But hey, not long ago he was making The Rock.
All right, Air America forever, Eric.
Very rude. Very rude.
Are you finished? All right. I almost said something, but all right, I'm going to let it go. I'm going to be the bigger person about it.
Forever, Eric.
Huh? Yeah, exactly. All right. Let's get to Mike. Did you want?
One more thing, say you were just talking about that whole idea of her sufferings for future generations to know that the devil is real and the spiritual world is real. I just like to add the victim soul not only does all that, but through her suffering actually unites with Jesus outside of time and atones for all these horrible things. Think about one day in heaven when everything that is painful becomes untrue. How does that happen? Like her pain is actually atoning, is actually making these horrible things that happened in the past throughout all time and generations untrue. So there's a really giant spiritual significance for these victim souls and these great saints that do these things. More than just God wants everyone to know the devil is real. They didn't really get into it because it's a film. But if you look at Annalise, and if she was that kind of saint, I mean, she could be getting us all into heaven, and we thank her when we get there.
Okay.
Just wild thoughts.
It's
really
it's a beautiful idea. It's a beautiful idea. I would not be opposed. All right, let's get to the part in the stream where we rate the film. This channel has a rating system that goes from 0 to 5 up by halves. So 0, 0.5, 1, 1.5, all the way to 5. So 0, for example, would be I'd rather eat raw beets than watch this movie again, all the way to 5, which is this is the journey, this is the destination, this is why I watch films in the first place. Michael James, what would you give Scott Derrickson's The Exorcism of Emily Rose?
5. It's a great movie, and it's my kind of movie. Great movie and my kind of movie. It's a win-win for me. It's a 5.
All right, a 5. Fair enough. Wow, I didn't see a 5 coming. All right. The Power of Christ Compels Bill. What do you got for us?
I'll give it a 4. Very good movie. Very well done. I am not a fan of the type of historical fiction that strays too far from the actual source material. And as much as I like this film, and I'm very interested in the case of Annalisa, this movie sort of takes too many turns to the fictional for me, and it kind of has to bend the knee to the horror audience, and in doing that, it sort of takes me out of it a little bit. That's not to say it wasn't great. I'm not saying it's a bad movie. I'm just saying that's not why I'm going 5.
I remember, I think it was Father Rippinger, who said, if you had to make, it would be hard to make a horror movie about possession if you did it the way that or about exorcisms the way that they actually did exorcisms. He's like, we don't do them at midnight in the middle of the woods, in the middle of a thunderstorm, in an isolated cabin, all by ourselves, this sort of thing. Like, it doesn't work that way. If you were just in the back area of a church, it doesn't present the same way. And what we saw, even when we covered The Devil and Father Amort, it looked like no type of exorcism we had ever seen before in Hollywood. So again, you've got the history versus Hollywood thing. Yeah, but I get what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying. For me, I'm going to go with a 4.5.
Okay.
I can't find anything wrong with the film. It is a horror film. It's a horror film, so it has to have certain horror tropes. It's like it would be like having a comic book movie without the guy not wanting to be a superhero.
Right.
You know, that's a comic book trope. You can't avoid it. I think it's very well done. I think it had a fantastic cast. I loved all the skeptics. You know, I love that everybody, and like I said, without that scene from Emily Rhodes reading the letter, or Father reading the letter at the end, it could have very easily been a movie that just where everybody loses, but it's not. And yeah, I like it. I'll probably end up buying it on Blu-ray and make myself a nice upgrade. I'm sure you can find a reasonable copy online. Okay, so we got a 5, a 4.5, and a 4. All right, that's not bad. That's not bad. All right, the power. Well, Bill, just plug something.
Well, look for my new band. I joined a band called Soup Sandwich.
Cool.
Surf band in Monmouth County. We're gearing up to start looking for some gigs, and I'm like the 4th bassist, and this thing's been going on for like 10 years, so I'm just new at it. But I love playing surf music, so that is my latest project. And if I can, not a paid spokesman, but download the app called Catholic Exorcism. Monsignor Rossetti's fantastic app. It's got a lot of good stuff. My favorite part is prayers that you can actually say for deliverance from spiritual battles. He has a whole section of prayers for the laity. So download Catholic Exorcism.
That's us.
It's an excellent app for you.
All right, well, that's one of the better plugs that we've had. Michael James, what's going on with Divine Will Error? We are now in the Easter season.
Yes, I am beginning to produce a podcast series about conversations with the demon Screw Tape from the Screw Tape letters of C.S. Lewis. I'm plotting this. I'm having a full-scale production of this. And it's a innovation of the classic book. I'm excited about it, and I'm not sure when it will air, but we're in the works, and it's going to be very interesting.
Right, that's going to be cool. That's very. When you told me that idea, I was like, "Fuck, that's a great idea." Very nice, very nice. All right, for this channel, last night I was on with screenwriter and film director Spider Dabrowski. And Spider has released yet another film, a new horror film starring Doug Jones, who played Abe Sapien in Hellboy. It's his second time working with him, and he was in The Shape of Water, and he was the physical actor for The Silver Surfer and the Fantastic Four movie called The Weeping. And he brought 2 other actors on there, Jonathan Charles and Isabel Hahn, who has some credits from the VHS anthology, VHS 99. And that was a really good conversation. They shot a movie in 4 days, 23 pages per day, blasted it out. And hopefully around the Halloween season, he will have another film, and I'll have him back on here. It was very nice talking to those young people. It's good that, you know, as much as we get on about Hollywood or Hollyweird or whatever, you forget that there are a lot of people that aren't A-list stars that, you know, are trying to make it, or, you know, or behind the cameras, that are just regular people. It's not, you know, their favorite celebrity that you hate sort of situation. They're like 1/10 of 1% of what goes on there. We have this. And I'm not sure what's going to happen for next week. I have to pick a film. I had a list of films out here, but because the week has been so rushed, I don't know what I'm going to be covering for the following week, but I'll get it out to everybody by the weekend. So if you want to join, you'll have a chance to screen it. Okay. My thanks to The Power of Christ Compels Bill. My thanks to Michael James. We will see you all I'd like to say no thanks to Eric from Hey Internet Eric here. And we'll be seeing you at the next Al Pacino movie. All right, take care, everyone. Have a good one. God bless you. Hey, everybody. This is the American Werewolf. Thanks for stopping by. Like the video, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel.